In the vastness of space, where 1,000 civilizations had risen and fallen, there existed an unspoken rule among the galactic community. Never provoke the humans, not because they were the strongest, the Krillians held that title. Not because they were the most advanced, the Etherians had mastered technologies beyond imagination. The humans were feared for something far more terrifying, their unpredictability and their refusal to accept defeat. Most species had their elite warriors, their special units trained for impossible missions. But when the galaxy's criminals, warlords, and rogue states heard whispers of Earth's special forces, they didn't scoff or prepare countermeasures. They ran. They hid. They prayed to whatever gods they worshipped that they would never encounter these shadows in human form. Because while other species created soldiers, humans created legends. And legends, as the galaxy was about to learn, have a way of becoming terrifyingly real when you least expect them. The emergency beacon from the Nexus research station had been silent for exactly 73 hours when Ambassador Kexter received the call that would change everything. The Vorthan diplomat was in the middle of reviewing trade agreements when his communication device buzzed with the distinctive pattern reserved for galactic emergencies. "Ambassador," came the trembling voice of Controller Yith from Central Command. "We have a situation." Kexter's 4 arms continued working at his desk, his mind still focused on grain shipments and mineral rights. The Nexus station was a remote research facility studying dark matter fluctuations near the outer rim. What could possibly be urgent about some scientists missing their check-in schedule? "Send a maintenance crew," he replied without looking up. "Probably just another communication array failure." "Sir, you don't understand. The entire station is gone." That got Kexter's attention. His primary eyes swiveled toward the communication device while his secondary pair remained focused on the documents. "Gone? Define gone, Controller." "As in no longer exists, sir. Our long-range sensors show empty space where the station should be. No debris field, no energy signatures, nothing. 3,000 personnel and a Class 5 research facility have simply vanished." The documents suddenly seemed far less important. Kexter set down his stylus and activated the full holographic display above his desk. The star chart materialized, showing the last known position of Nexus Station as a blinking red dot in an otherwise unremarkable section of space. When was the last confirmed contact? 73 hours, 18 minutes ago. Standard research update, nothing unusual, then silence. Kexter's mandibles clicked nervously. In his 40 years of diplomatic service, he had seen space stations destroyed, captured, and even stolen, but never completely erased from existence. What was their current research focus? "That's classified above my level, sir. But I can tell you they were working on something called Project Shadowgate. The file is sealed by the Galactic Security Council." The name sent a chill through Kexter's exoskeleton. Shadowgate. He had heard whispers in the diplomatic corridors, fragments of conversations quickly silenced when others approached. Something about interdimensional research, about doorways that shouldn't be opened. "Controller, I'm authorizing a full investigation fleet. Assemble everything we have in the sector." "Already done, sir. Admiral Thex is mobilizing the 3rd Battle Group as we speak. Estimated arrival at the coordinates in 6 standard days." 6 days felt like an eternity when dealing with the unknown. Kexter paced behind his desk, his 4 arms gesturing as he processed the implications. A missing research station was bad enough, but one working on classified interdimensional projects suggested far worse possibilities. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Exploration Corps was having what she thought would be a routine day. Her ship, the Resilience, was conducting standard patrol operations along the neutral zone when Lieutenant Martinez burst onto the bridge with an expression that immediately put her on alert. "Captain, we're receiving a priority communication from Earth Command. Eyes only, maximum encryption." Chen accepted the data pad and quickly scanned the message. Her expression grew darker with each line. When she finished, she handed the pad back to Martinez and turned to address her bridge crew. "Navigation, plot a course for the Nexus Station coordinates. Maximum burn." "Ma'am," her helmsman replied, "there's no Nexus Station on our charts." "There was 3 days ago." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Chen activated the ship's internal communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We are proceeding to investigate a potential first contact scenario. This is not a drill. All departments report readiness in 1 hour. As the Resilience changed course and began accelerating toward the unknown, Chen retreated to her ready room and activated a secure channel to Earth. Command, this is Resilience. We're en route to the coordinates. What aren't you telling me about this Shadowgate project? The reply came through so heavily encrypted that it took several seconds for her communication array to decode it. When the words finally appeared on her screen, Chen felt her blood run cold. Captain Chen, Project Shadowgate was a joint human-alien research initiative studying what we believe to be naturally occurring interdimensional rifts. 3 days ago, we lost all contact with our research team. The alien partners are blaming equipment failure, but our intelligence suggests they may have discovered something they don't want to share. Your mission parameters are being updated. Prepare for potential hostile first contact with unknown entities. Chen stared at the message long after it had encrypted itself and disappeared from her screen. Unknown entities. That phrase had a weight to it that made her stomach clench with anticipation and dread. On the other side of the galaxy, in the crystal spires of the Etherian Collective, High Counselor Vexthira was experiencing something her species rarely felt: genuine fear. The Etherians had evolved beyond most physical needs, their consciousness existing primarily in energy form, but fear was a survival instinct that transcended biology. "Show me the data again," she commanded her subordinates. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the energy readings from the Nexus station's final moments. To most species, the readouts would have been incomprehensible streams of numbers and wavelengths, but the Etherians saw patterns in energy that others missed entirely. "There," she pointed with a tendril of pure thought given form. "That spike in dimensional frequency, it's not natural." "Counselor," her aide transmitted directly into her consciousness, "the pattern matches theoretical models for controlled dimensional breaching. Someone deliberately opened a rift." "But who? The humans don't have that technology. The Vorthans barely understand basic dimensional theory. The Krillians are too brutish for such delicate work." "Unknown, Counselor, but the energy signature suggests the breach is still active, just relocated." Vexthira processed this information at the speed of light, her consciousness racing through thousands of possible scenarios. An active dimensional breach in unknown hands was a threat to the entire galaxy. Such rifts could destabilize local spacetime, create temporal paradoxes, or worse yet, allow something from another dimension to enter their reality. "Contact the Galactic Security Council immediately. We need to assemble a joint task force." "What do we tell them, Counselor?" "The truth, that something has taken our research station, along with 3,000 souls, and we have no idea what we're dealing with." Back on Earth, in a nondescript building that officially didn't exist, Colonel Marcus Webb was briefing a team that officially didn't exist either. The men and women seated around the table wore no uniforms, carried no identification, and would never appear in any military records. They were ghosts by design, shadows by necessity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb began, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent in conflicts that never made the news, "we have a situation that requires our particular skill set." The briefing room's lights dimmed as a holographic display activated, showing the empty coordinates where Nexus Station should have been. Webb continued without missing a beat. 76 hours ago, a joint research facility conducting classified interdimensional experiments went dark. Not destroyed, not captured, gone. Along with it, 3,000 personnel and technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Sergeant First Class Ana Rodriguez leaned forward, her scarred hands folded on the table. "What's the threat assessment, Colonel?" "Unknown, which is what makes this so dangerous. Our alien partners are panicking, which tells me they know more than they're sharing. Intelligence suggests the missing station made contact with something from another dimension just before disappearing." "Another dimension," muttered Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson, shaking his head. "And here I thought fighting in Zero-G was complicated." Webb's expression remained stone serious. "This is not a joke, Thompson. If hostile interdimensional entities have acquired our technology and personnel, the implications are catastrophic. They would have access to our defensive systems, our communication networks, and worst of all, detailed information about Earth's location and capabilities." The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled over the team. Captain Lisa Park, the unit's intelligence specialist, spoke up first. "What's our mission profile, sir?" "Find that station. Determine what happened to our people, and if necessary, prevent interdimensional technology from falling into the wrong hands by any means necessary." "Rules of engagement?" asked Master Sergeant David Kim. Webb's smile was cold and sharp. "There are no rules where we're going. This is a black operation with a simple directive: succeed or ensure no one else does either." As the briefing continued, none of them could have imagined that their mission would take them into realms of existence that challenged everything they thought they knew about reality itself. They were special forces, trained to adapt, overcome, and survive in any environment against any enemy. They were about to discover that any environment included places where the laws of physics were mere suggestions, and any enemy encompassed beings that existed outside the normal constraints of time and space. The galaxy had spent centuries building alliances, establishing trade routes, and creating the complex diplomatic networks that kept peace among the stars. All of that careful construction was about to be tested by forces that recognized no treaties, acknowledged no boundaries, and understood no language except power. In the depths of space, something that had once been Nexus Station drifted through dimensions that had no names, carrying passengers who were slowly learning that their understanding of the universe had been fatally incomplete. And somewhere in the darkness between realities, entities older than civilization itself were making plans that would either unite the galaxy in common defense or see it consumed by forces beyond imagination. The humans called them Special Forces. The galaxy was about to discover why that name carried such weight in the darkness between the stars. Admiral Thex's flagship, the Dominant Virtue, was a monument to Krillian engineering philosophy. If something could be made bigger and more heavily armed, it should be. The massive dreadnought led a fleet of 37 vessels representing 8 different species, the largest joint military operation in recent galactic history. As they approached the coordinates where Nexus Station should have been, the various captains began reporting their findings through the fleet communication network. The results were uniformly disturbing. "Gravitational sensors detect no mass concentrations," reported Captain Zalthara from the Etherian science vessel Luminous Thought. "It's as if the station never existed." "Electromagnetic spectrum analysis shows residual energy patterns," added Commander Vorth from the Centauri heavy cruiser Stellar Pride. "But they're unlike anything in our databases." Admiral Thex's massive bulk shifted in his command chair as he processed the reports. The Krillian warrior had led fleets against pirates, rebellions, and territorial disputes, but never against an enemy that could erase matter from existence. "Deploy sensor probes in a grid pattern," he ordered. "Scan every cubic meter of space in a 10 light-minute radius." As the fleet began its methodical search, none of them noticed the small human vessel that had been shadowing them for the past 6 hours. The Resilience maintained position just beyond sensor range, her advanced stealth systems making her effectively invisible to the larger ship's detection arrays. On the Resilience's bridge, Captain Chen watched the alien fleet's search pattern with professional interest. "They're being thorough," she observed to her first officer, "but they're looking for conventional explanations." "Should we make contact, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Martinez. "Share information." Chen considered the option for a moment, then shook her head. "Not yet. Let's see what they find first. Sometimes it's better to observe before revealing your position." Her caution proved prescient when the first probe returned data that sent shockwaves through the joint fleet. The readings were so unusual that Admiral Thex called an immediate conference of all ship captains. "What you're about to see," began Dr. Kylvan, the fleet's chief scientist, "challenges our understanding of dimensional physics." The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of the space around the former station coordinates. At first glance, it appeared normal, empty space with the usual background radiation and cosmic debris. But as the display shifted to show dimensional frequency analysis, a different picture emerged. "There's a pocket of space here," Dr. Kylvan indicated a sphere roughly 3 kilometers in diameter, "where the dimensional barriers have been thinned. It's as if something has worn away the boundary between our reality and whatever lies beyond." Captain Vorthak of the Draconian Empire leaned forward, Her reptilian features creased with concentration. Could this explain the station's disappearance? Possibly. If someone had technology to manipulate dimensional barriers, they could theoretically move matter from our reality into an adjacent dimension. But the energy requirements would be enormous, far beyond anything we've developed. Admiral Thex's voice rumbled through the communication system. Are we dealing with an unknown species, some kind of interdimensional invaders? Before Dr. Calvin could respond, every ship in the fleet received an emergency alert. The thinned area of space was expanding. All vessels, Admiral Thex commanded, increase distance from the anomaly immediately. Science teams, I want constant monitoring of the expansion rate. As the fleet pulled back, Captain Chen made a decision that would have significant consequences. Instead of retreating with the alien vessels, she ordered the Resilience to move closer to the expanding anomaly. Captain, her science officer called out, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations ahead. Whatever's causing this dimensional distortion is becoming more active. Steady as she goes, Chen replied, her eyes fixed on the readings. If we're going to understand what happened to our people, we need to take risks the others won't. Her gamble paid off when the Resilience's advanced sensors detected something the larger fleet had missed. Deep within the dimensional anomaly, there was a structure, twisted and partially phased between realities, but unmistakably artificial. My God, whispered her tactical officer, that's Nexus Station, or what's left of it. The image on the screen was like something from a nightmare. The research station existed in a state of dimensional flux, its hull rippling between solid matter and energy patterns that hurt to look at. Sections of the structure appeared to exist in multiple realities simultaneously, creating optical illusions that made the human crew feel dizzy just watching. Life signs, Chen asked quietly. Difficult to determine. The dimensional interference is scrambling our sensors, but there are definitely energy patterns consistent with life support systems. Some of the crew might still be alive in there. Chen activated the ship's communication system. Attention, Nexus Station, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Resilience. Please respond. The reply came not as a radio transmission, but as a direct intrusion into their minds. Every member of the Resilience crew suddenly heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, speaking in a language that bypassed their ears entirely. Help us, the barriers are breaking down, they're coming through. The message was followed by images, fragmented visions of the station's final moments. The crew saw scientists working desperately at their instruments as reality began to crack around them. They witnessed dimensional rifts opening like wounds in space-time, revealing glimpses of other realities that were fundamentally wrong. And they saw something else, something that moved through those rifts with purpose and intelligence. The images were too distorted to make out details, but the impression of vast, alien consciousness was overwhelming. Cut the connection, Chen ordered, but it was too late. The mental link had been established, and more information was flooding through. The crew experienced the terror of the station personnel as they realized their research had attracted attention from beings that existed outside normal reality. They felt the helplessness as those beings began to pull the station into their dimensional realm, piece by piece. But most disturbing of all, they sensed that this was just the beginning. The entities from beyond had tasted our reality and found it interesting. When the mental connection finally ended, several crew members were on their knees, overwhelmed by the alien thoughts they had experienced. Captain Chen wiped blood from her nose and immediately opened a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha communication to Special Operations Command, she said, her voice steady despite the horror she had just experienced. We have confirmed interdimensional contact. Hostile entities have captured Nexus Station and are using it as a bridgehead into our reality. Request immediate deployment of Omega-level response assets. The reply came back within minutes, encrypted with codes that most of the galaxy had never seen. Confirmed, Captain. Special Forces Team 7 is being deployed to your location. Prepare for unconventional warfare protocols. As the Resilience maintained its vigil near the dimensional anomaly, the alien fleet was dealing with their own crisis. The expanding distortion was now large enough to be visible to the naked eye, appearing as a sphere of twisted space where stars seemed to bend and flow like liquid. Admiral, reported Dr. Calvin, The expansion rate is accelerating. If this continues, it could destabilize the entire sector. Recommendations. We need to find a way to collapse the dimensional breach. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. That understanding came sooner than expected when the first interdimensional scouts emerged from the anomaly. They appeared as shifting patterns of energy and matter that hurt to perceive directly, moving through space in ways that defied physics. The alien sensors could detect them, but every attempt to analyze their composition resulted in nonsensical data. "They're not bound by our physical laws," Dr. Calvin reported, his voice tight with scientific frustration. "They exist partially in our dimension and partially in others. Our weapons might not even be able to affect them." The scouts circled the alien fleet like predators evaluating prey, then suddenly vanished back into the dimensional rift. Minutes later, the anomaly pulsed with new energy patterns, and something much larger began to emerge. Admiral Thex had commanded fleets for 3 decades, facing everything from pirate armadas to rogue AI battleships. But as he watched the thing that came through the dimensional breach, he experienced something new. The absolute certainty that his weapons, his tactics, and his experience were utterly inadequate for the challenge ahead. The entity was vast beyond comprehension, its form shifting between states of matter that seemed to include several that shouldn't exist. It communicated not through radio waves, but by directly manipulating local spacetime, sending ripples of meaning through the fabric of reality itself. "Surrender the dimensional keys," the message came, felt rather than heard by every member of the alien fleet. "Your research has opened pathways that belong to us. Return what you have taken, and your deaths will be swift." "All ships," Admiral Thex commanded, "battle stations. Prepare for engagement with unknown hostiles." But before the first shot could be fired, space itself convulsed around them. The interdimensional entity had done something to local reality, creating zones where matter behaved according to alien physics. Several of the fleet's smaller vessels found their engines failing as the fundamental forces holding their atoms together began to fluctuate. "Admiral," came a desperate transmission from the Centauri vessel Star's Edge. "Our hull is destabilizing. The molecular bonds are fluctuating. We're losing structural integrity." The Star's Edge began to come apart at the atomic level, her crew dying as their bodies were scattered across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The alien fleet watched in horror as one of their own ships was casually disassembled by forces beyond their understanding. That's when the second human ship arrived. The transport vessel Ghost Protocol dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the engagement zone. Her arrival so sudden and unexpected that neither the alien fleet nor the interdimensional entities detected her, until she was already deploying her cargo. Colonel Webb's Special Forces team exited the transport in powered armor that looked primitive compared to the alien fleet's advanced systems, but appearances were deceiving. The suits were designed not for comfort or efficiency, but for operation in environments where normal physics might not apply. "Radio silence from here on," Webb commanded as his team spread out in 3-dimensional formation. "We go in dark and quiet. Our objective is the station. Get our people out and gather intelligence on these entities." "Colonel," Sergeant Rodriguez's voice came through their encrypted tactical network. "The readings on these things are off the charts. They're not even fully in our dimension." "Then we adapt. We've fought in worse places." The team moved through space using personal thruster packs, their armor's stealth systems making them invisible to both conventional sensors and the exotic detection methods the interdimensional entities might employ. They were gambling that beings from another reality might overlook something as mundane as humans in powered suits. The gamble paid off. While the alien fleet exchanged increasingly desperate fire with the interdimensional scouts, the human Special Forces team slipped through the chaos toward the twisted remains of Nexus Station. "Jesus Christ," muttered Staff Sergeant Thompson as they approached the station. "The whole thing is flickering in and out of existence." "Stay focused," Webb replied. "Remember your training. When the environment doesn't make sense, trust your instruments and your mission parameters." As they approached the station's docking bay, they could see that sections of the structure were cycling through different states of reality. Sometimes the docking bay was solid and normal. Sometimes it appeared to be made of some crystalline material that refracted light in impossible ways. and sometimes it seemed to be nothing but organized energy held in a station-like pattern. "Timing is going to be critical," observed Captain Park. "We need to enter when the bay is solid enough to support us, but still permeable enough for our equipment to function." Webb activated his suit's quantum stabilization field, an experimental piece of technology that was supposed to help maintain a consistent local reality field around the wearer. The other team members followed suit, their armor humming with exotic energies. "On my mark," Webb commanded, watching the station's reality fluctuations. "Mark." The six-person team flew directly into the shifting matter of the docking bay, their quantum fields interacting with the station's dimensional flux in ways that created brief sparks of impossible colors. For a moment, they existed in a state somewhere between normal matter and pure energy. Then they were through, standing in a corridor that looked almost normal except for the fact that the walls occasionally became transparent, revealing the cosmic horror taking place in the space around them. "Life support is functional but erratic," reported Master Sergeant Kim, checking his environmental readings. "Gravity is pointing in 3 different directions depending on where you're standing." "Move out," Webb ordered. "We find survivors first, then we gather data on what these things want with our technology." As the team moved deeper into the dimensional maze that had once been Nexus Station, they began to understand the true scope of the threat they were facing. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a fundamental rewriting of reality itself. The interdimensional entities weren't just using advanced technology. They were beings for whom the laws of physics were malleable suggestions rather than immutable rules. But humans had something the entities hadn't encountered before: the stubborn refusal to accept that something was impossible just because it defied logic. And in the twisted corridors of a research station caught between dimensions, that refusal would prove to be a weapon more powerful than any conventional arsenal. Inside Nexus Station, reality was having an identity crisis. Corridors that should have led to laboratories instead opened onto views of distant nebulae that existed in entirely different dimensions. Gravity changed direction based on what surface you were looking at, and time seemed to flow at different rates depending on which section of the station you occupied. Colonel Webb's team moved through this maze of broken physics with the grim determination that had made Earth's special forces legendary. Their quantum stabilization fields created small bubbles of consistent reality around each team member. But even with this protection, the experience was deeply unsettling. "Colonel," Sergeant Rodriguez reported through their tactical network, "I'm picking up human life signs 3 levels down, but the route there keeps changing. The station's internal structure is shifting." "Adapt and overcome," Webb replied, though privately he was beginning to wonder if there were limits to what human adaptability could handle. "Park, what's your analysis of these dimensional fluctuations?" Captain Park consulted her instruments while simultaneously fighting off a wave of vertigo as the ceiling briefly became a window into some alien starscape. "The fluctuations follow a pattern, sir. It's almost like the station is breathing, shifting between our reality and whatever dimension these entities come from. Then we time our movements with the shifts. Thompson, Kim, take point. Rodriguez, watch our 6. Park, you're with me. We find our people and we find out what these things want." The team navigated deeper into the station, passing laboratories where human and alien scientists hung suspended in fields of energy that preserved them in a state somewhere between life and death. The expressions on their faces suggested they were experiencing things that no sane mind should have to process. "They're alive," reported Master Sergeant Kim as they paused at one such chamber. "But their brain patterns are off the charts. It's like they're having every possible dream and nightmare simultaneously." "Can we extract them?" Webb asked. "Not without risking their sanity. Whatever these entities are doing, they're using the prisoners' minds as some kind of computational matrix." The grim reality of the situation was becoming clear. The interdimensional beings hadn't just captured the station for its technology. They were using the crew's consciousness to help them understand and manipulate human reality. This realization was interrupted by the sudden appearance of one of the entities itself. It materialized in the corridor ahead of them, its form shifting between states that included several that human eyes weren't equipped to process. Looking directly at it was like trying to focus on a shape that existed in too many dimensions at once. Humans, the entity communicated directly into their minds, its thoughts carrying overtones of curiosity and contempt. Your species continues to surprise us. You should not be able to exist in this dimensional flux. Webb stepped forward, his rifle trained on something that might or might not have been the entity's center mass. Let our people go. This doesn't have to be a fight. The response came as a wave of alien amusement that made the entire team stagger. Fight! You cannot fight us, little creatures. We are the architects of reality. We shape the fundamental forces that hold your atoms together. To demonstrate its point, the entity gestured at the corridor around them. The walls began to flow like liquid, reforming into shapes that hurt to perceive. The air itself took on a crystalline structure that should have been impossible but somehow still allowed them to breathe. Your weapons fire packets of accelerated matter, the entity continued. Your explosives rearrange molecular bonds. Your strategies assume that cause and effect flow in linear time. All of these assumptions are quaint limitations of a species bound to a single reality. Staff Sergeant Thompson, never one to back down from a challenge, fired his rifle directly at the entity. The high-energy pulse passed through its form without any apparent effect, then ricocheted off 3 walls that hadn't existed a moment before, finally dissipating into a shower of sparks that briefly took the shape of tiny, screaming faces. Your technology amuses us, the entity observed, but observe what true power can accomplish. The corridor around them suddenly expanded into a vast chamber that definitely hadn't been part of the original station design. The walls displayed scenes from across the galaxy, the alien fleet still fighting desperately outside, other star systems where similar dimensional breaches were beginning to open, and Earth itself, looking small and vulnerable in the cosmic distance. We have been studying your species since you first achieved faster-than-light travel, the entity explained. Individually, humans are unremarkable, but collectively you display a property we find intriguing. Which is, Webb demanded, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. Chaos. Every other species we have encountered seeks to impose order on the universe, to find patterns and exploit them for predictable results. But humans embrace randomness, improvise solutions that should not work, and somehow succeed through pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The entity's form shifted, briefly taking on aspects that seemed almost human before dissolving back into impossible geometry. We believe this quality may be useful in our own efforts to expand beyond the confines of ordered reality. Captain Park raised her scanner, trying to get readings on the entity while it was focused on their conversation. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Colonel, this thing isn't just interdimensional, it's artificial, some kind of construct designed to breach reality barriers. Artificial? Webb's mind raced through the implications. If these entities were constructed rather than evolved, that meant there was an intelligence behind them, something that had created interdimensional weapons and sent them into their reality with specific objectives. Your companion is perceptive, the entity acknowledged. We are indeed instruments of a greater purpose. Our creators exist in dimensions so far removed from your reality that direct contact would unravel your local spacetime. We serve as their exploratory tools, their means of evaluating lesser realities for potential integration. Integration? Rodriguez asked, though she suspected she already knew what that meant. The process by which chaos-prone realities are absorbed into more ordered dimensional structures. Your reality shows promise, but it requires editing, removal of inconsistencies, elimination of unpredictable variables. And humans are unpredictable variables, Webb concluded. The most unpredictable we have encountered. This makes you either invaluable allies or existential threats to the integration process. We are here to determine which. The chamber around them shifted again, and suddenly they were surrounded by images of Earth's military history. Battles won against impossible odds, last stands that became legendary victories, soldiers who had accomplished missions that defied all tactical analysis. Your species has a documented history of succeeding where success should be impossible, the entity continued. We wish to understand this phenomenon. Is it truly random, or is there some underlying pattern we have failed to identify? There's a pattern, all right, Webb said grimly. When you push humans into a corner, we get creative, and creativity is just another word for controlled chaos. To demonstrate his point, He activated a device that Captain Park had been secretly preparing while the entity focused on their conversation. It wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. It was a quantum randomizer that introduced pure chaos into local dimensional fields. The effect on the entity was immediate and dramatic. Its carefully controlled form began to fluctuate wildly as the random quantum fields interfered with its dimensional structure. For the first time since the encounter began, the alien construct showed something resembling distress. What? How did you? This should not affect beings of our dimensional configuration. That's the thing about chaos, Webb replied as he signaled his team to move toward the chamber's exit. It doesn't care about your configuration. Chaos adapts. The team fought their way through corridors that were now actively hostile, as the damaged entity attempted to trap them using walls that shifted into maze-like configurations and floors that tried to open into bottomless dimensional voids. But human special forces had trained for urban warfare, zero-G combat, and operations in environments where the enemy controlled the terrain. This was just another day at the office, albeit with more impossible physics than usual. "Colonel," Park called out as they reached what appeared to be the station's central computer core, "I'm detecting massive data transfers. The entities are downloading everything, our research, our tactical databases, even personal files from the crew." "Can you stop it?" "Maybe, but I'll need to interface directly with the quantum core, and there's no telling how the dimensional flux will affect the data transfer." Webb made the decision that would define the rest of the mission. "Do it. We can't let them learn everything about Earth's defenses." As Park began her work, the rest of the team established a defensive perimeter around the computer core. The station's reality was becoming increasingly unstable as more entities arrived to investigate the damage caused by the quantum randomizer. "Colonel," Rodriguez reported, "we've got company, multiple contacts, all showing the same impossible physics as our friend back there." "Rules of engagement remain the same," Webb replied calmly. "When conventional tactics don't work, we improvise." The battle that followed would have been impossible to describe to anyone who hadn't witnessed it personally. Human soldiers fired weapons that sometimes worked normally, sometimes created effects that defied physics, and occasionally opened temporary rifts into other dimensions entirely. The interdimensional entities responded with attacks that rewrote local reality, turning walls into aggressive plant life, changing the direction of gravity to slam the humans against surfaces that might or might not be solid. But the humans adapted. When their rifles stopped working in conventional ways, they used the random effects as improvised weapons. When gravity became unreliable, they used their zero-G training to turn the chaotic environment to their advantage. When the entities tried to trap them with impossible geometry, they used explosives to create new exits that followed human logic rather than alien design. "This is impossible," one of the entities communicated, its thoughts tinged with something that might have been frustration. "Your tactics have no underlying pattern. Your strategies contradict themselves. How can you function in such disorder?" "Practice," Thompson replied, as he used a grenade to collapse a wall that had been trying to eat him. "Lots and lots of practice." Meanwhile, Captain Park was making discoveries that would change humanity's understanding of their place in the cosmos. The station's computers contained files that had been hidden even from the research team, evidence that Earth's government had been aware of interdimensional entities for decades and had been secretly preparing defenses. "Colonel," she reported while simultaneously fighting off a data stream that was trying to reprogram her brain, "Earth Command has been lying to us. They didn't just know about these entities, they've been preparing for this exact scenario." "How?" "Project Shadowgate wasn't just research, it was bait. They wanted to attract the entity's attention to force a confrontation under controlled conditions." The implications were staggering. Humanity's leadership had deliberately endangered 3,000 people to gain intelligence on an interdimensional threat. But as Webb processed this information, he realized the cold logic behind the decision. Better to face the entities now, with some preparation, than to encounter them later when they had chosen the time and place of contact. "Did they plan for us to be here too?" he asked. Park's response was interrupted by a new voice on their communication system, not from their team, but from somewhere deep within the station's dimensional flux. Colonel Webb, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez, Nexus Station Xenobiology Department. We're trapped in Laboratory 7, but we've made a discovery you need to know about. These entities aren't just invaders, they're refugees. The transmission cut off abruptly, but it had already changed everything. If the interdimensional beings were fleeing from something even worse than themselves, then humanity's problems were just beginning. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been studying xenobiology for 15 years, but nothing in her extensive education had prepared her for the revelations she had uncovered in the final hours before Nexus Station's reality began to collapse. When Colonel Webb's team finally reached Laboratory 7, they found the space existed in a pocket of relative stability, a bubble of normal physics that the trapped scientists had somehow managed to maintain using modified containment fields originally designed for quantum particle research. "Thank God you're here," Dr. Martinez said as the Special Forces team entered the lab. She was a small woman with prematurely gray hair and eyes that had seen too much in recent days. "I wasn't sure if anyone would be able to navigate the dimensional chaos." "Doctor," Webb said urgently, "you mentioned that these entities are refugees. What did you mean?" Martinez gestured to a series of displays that showed data streams so complex they made the human brain ache just trying to process them. "We've been monitoring their communications, not the directed thoughts they use to talk to us, but their internal network traffic. Colonel, they're running from something that scares beings who can rewrite the laws of physics." "What could possibly threaten creatures like that?" asked Captain Park. "Reality itself," Martinez replied grimly. "Or rather, a force that imposes absolute order on reality. They call it the convergence, a phenomenon that spreads across dimensions, converting chaotic realities into perfectly ordered, perfectly predictable systems." She activated a holographic display that showed a map of local dimensional space. What the humans saw made their blood run cold. Vast regions of the multidimensional matrix were marked in gray, areas where the normal chaos of quantum fluctuations had been replaced by rigid, crystalline patterns of absolute order. "The gray zones are where the convergence has already taken hold," Martinez continued. "Time flows at exactly predictable rates. Matter behaves according to inflexible rules. Consciousness itself is regulated and standardized. It's the ultimate victory of order over chaos, and it's spreading." "And these entities that captured our station?" Webb asked. "They're desperately trying to find a reality with enough inherent chaos to resist the convergence. Most dimensions they've tested have been too ordered, too predictable. But human reality, with its quantum uncertainties and chaotic systems, shows promise as a potential refuge." Staff Sergeant Thompson lowered his rifle slightly. "So they're not invading, they're applying for asylum." "In the most aggressive and terrifying way possible," Martinez confirmed. "But yes, essentially. The problem is that their very presence here weakens the barriers between dimensions. If they stay too long, they'll make our reality vulnerable to convergence itself." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't facing an invasion. They were caught in the middle of a cosmic war between chaos and order, with their reality serving as the potential battleground. "Doctor," Park said urgently, "can we communicate this to the entities? If we understand their situation, maybe we can find a solution that doesn't involve them harvesting our people's consciousness." "I've been trying, but their communication methods are overwhelming. Direct mental contact with beings that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously tends to break human minds after extended exposure." Webb made a decision that would have horrified his commanding officers if they had been present. "Then we find another way to communicate. Rodriguez, Kim, maintain the perimeter. Thompson, help the doctor prepare her research for extraction. Park, you're with me. We're going to talk to these things face to face." "Sir," Park protested, "the mental strain could be permanent. The alternative is letting our reality get caught in a multi-dimensional war. I'd rather risk my sanity than humanity's survival." Webb activated his suit's quantum stabilization field at maximum strength, creating a buffer that should theoretically protect his mind from the worst effects of interdimensional contact. Park reluctantly followed suit, her scientific curiosity warring with her survival instincts. They made their way to the station's central hub, where the concentration of interdimensional entities was highest. The space around the hub had been transformed into something that existed in at least 7 dimensions simultaneously. creating optical effects that made reality seem to flow like liquid around impossible geometric structures. Entities of the interdimensional collective, Webb called out, his voice carrying both authority and a carefully controlled absence of hostility. We know about the convergence. We know you're running from it. Let's talk. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A dozen entity voices spoke directly into their minds simultaneously, their thoughts carrying undertones of desperation, hope, and ancient fear. You understand our situation, Chaos Bearer, came the primary communication. We did not expect such swift comprehension from your species. We're adaptable that way, Webb replied, fighting off waves of vertigo as the entity's presence pressed against the boundaries of his consciousness. But holding our people prisoner isn't going to solve your problem. The convergence will detect your presence here eventually. We require understanding of your chaos generation mechanisms, the entity responded. Your species produces disorder through methods we cannot comprehend. This knowledge could be the key to creating reality spaces that resist convergence integration. Captain Park stepped forward, her scanner showing readings that defied several fundamental constants. What if we helped you willingly? What if we shared our research instead of you taking it by force? The concept seemed to cause confusion among the entities. Their forms flickered as they processed the idea of voluntary cooperation. You would assist us, even knowing that our presence weakens your dimensional barriers. We might, Webb said carefully, if you helped us understand how to strengthen those barriers, and if you released our people. What followed was the strangest negotiation in human history. The entities, despite their vast power, were creatures of ordered thought patterns. They understood hierarchy, authority structures, and logical exchanges of resources. What they didn't understand was human concepts like trust, sacrifice for the greater good, or the willingness to take risks for uncertain benefits. Your proposal contains variables we cannot calculate, the primary entity communicated. How do we know your cooperation will continue if circumstances change? You don't, Webb replied honestly. That's the chaos you're looking for. Human cooperation isn't predictable because it's based on values that can't be reduced to simple algorithms. The negotiation was interrupted by an alarm that penetrated even the dimensional flux around the station. Dr. Martinez's voice came through their communication systems, tight with panic. Colonel, we've got a problem. The dimensional barriers around the station are collapsing. Something massive is trying to break through from the other side. Webb and Park raced back to Laboratory 7, where Martinez was monitoring readings that showed their local spacetime was under assault from something vast and powerful. The convergence, Park asked. No, Martinez replied grimly. This is something else, something that exists in the gray zones, areas that have already been converted by the convergence. On the displays, they could see it approaching through dimensional space, a structure of pure order that moved through realities like a cosmic virus, converting chaos into rigid mathematical perfection wherever it passed. It's a conversion engine, one of the entities communicated, its thoughts now tinged with absolute terror. The convergence has found us. It sends these constructs to impose order on chaotic realities. The conversion engine was beautiful in the way that absolute order could be beautiful. Perfect geometric forms that followed mathematical principles so pure they transcended mere aesthetics. But its beauty was the beauty of death, of a universe where spontaneity and creativity had been eliminated in favor of perfect, predictable function. How long before it reaches our reality? Webb demanded. Minutes, perhaps less, the entity replied. Once it begins the conversion process, your dimension will be restructured according to convergence principles. All chaos will be eliminated. All unpredictability will be resolved into predetermined patterns. Including human consciousness, Park asked. Consciousness is the ultimate source of chaos in any reality. It would be the first target for conversion. Webb looked around at his team, at the trapped scientists, at the interdimensional entities that had been both captors and, potentially, allies. In that moment, he made the decision that would define humanity's relationship with forces beyond their understanding. Then we fight it. The entity's response carried undertones of amazement and horror. You cannot fight a conversion engine with conventional weapons. It exists in a state of perfect order. Your chaotic tactics will be analyzed and countered before you can implement them. Then we don't use conventional weapons, Webb replied. We use chaos itself. He turned to Martinez. Doctor, what would happen if we deliberately destabilized our local dimensional barriers, made our reality too chaotic for the engine to process? Martinez stared at him as if he had suggested destroying the sun. That would be incredibly dangerous. Too much chaos and our reality could collapse entirely. We could tear a hole in the dimensional fabric that nothing could repair. But it might work. It might, or it might kill us all. Webb nodded grimly. Rodriguez, Kim, Thompson, I need you to help the doctor set up her equipment. Park, coordinate with our interdimensional friends here. We're going to need their help. Sir, Thompson asked, what exactly are we going to do? Webb's smile was cold and determined. We're going to show the universe what happens when you try to impose order on humans. We're going to demonstrate why chaos isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. As the conversion engine drew closer, and the station's reality began to crystallize into rigid patterns, humanity prepared to make it stand not with superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but with the one thing that had always defined their species, the absolute refusal to accept that any situation was hopeless. The galaxy was about to learn why the humans called them special forces, and the convergence was about to discover that some forms of chaos couldn't be converted, they could only be survived. The final battle for reality began not with weapons, fire, or tactical maneuvers, but with Dr. Martinez frantically recalibrating quantum field generators while reality crystallized into rigid mathematical perfection around them. The conversion engine is analyzing our dimensional structure, she reported, her hands flying over controls that kept shifting as the engine imposed its ordered logic on the station's systems. It's identifying chaos sources and preparing to eliminate them. Colonel Webb watched through the laboratory's reinforced windows as sections of the station became geometrically perfect, their chaotic human-designed curves replaced by precise angular forms that followed optimal engineering principles. It was beautiful and terrifying, a preview of what would happen to all of human reality if they failed. What do we need to maximize chaos output? He asked. Unpredictable quantum states, random energy discharges, and... Martinez paused, looking at him with an expression of professional horror. And consciousness. Living minds are the most powerful chaos generators in any reality. The engine will target them first. Then we give it more consciousness than it can handle. Webb activated his suit's communication array and opened channels to every conscious being within range. His team, the surviving station crew, the interdimensional entities, and even the alien fleet still fighting desperately in the space around them. Attention all vessels and personnel, he broadcast. This is Colonel Marcus Webb, Earth Special Forces. In approximately 3 minutes, we are going to attempt something that has never been tried before. We're going to weaponize chaos itself against a force of absolute order. Admiral Thex's massive voice came back immediately. Colonel Webb, this is Admiral Thex, commanding the Joint Fleet. What do you need from us? Every thinking being in the sector needs to focus on being as unpredictable as possible. Don't follow standard protocols. Don't make logical decisions. Be random, be chaotic, be human. That's insane, came the response from Captain Vorthak. Exactly, Webb replied. That's the point. The conversion engine had reached the station's outer hull, and the effects were immediately visible. The twisted, reality-shifting structure began to straighten and organize itself, becoming a perfect geometric solid that hurt to look at in its mathematical purity. Colonel, Park reported, the engine is broadcasting conversion algorithms. It's trying to impose order on our thought patterns directly. Webb could feel it, a pressure in his mind that wanted to organize his thoughts into neat, logical patterns. The urge to think systematically, to follow proper procedures, to behave predictably was almost overwhelming. Resist it, he ordered, though he wasn't sure how to resist something that attacked the very foundation of consciousness itself. Think random thoughts, remember chaotic moments, focus on anything that doesn't make sense. The interdimensional entities were suffering worse than the humans. Their complex multidimensional consciousness made them prime targets for the conversion engine's ordering algorithms. One by one, they began to shift from fluid, chaotic forms into rigid crystalline structures that pulsed with mathematical perfection. We cannot maintain cohesion, the primary entity communicated, its thoughts now carrying overtones of geometric precision that were frightening in their clarity. The engine's algorithms are too powerful. We are becoming ordered. That's when Staff Sergeant Thompson did something that would be remembered in military academies for generations to come, assuming anyone survived to remember it. Instead of fighting the conversion process logically, he embraced pure human stubbornness. "Like hell you are," he announced, and proceeded to tell the most inappropriate joke he could remember while simultaneously singing his high school fight song and mentally reviewing his grandmother's recipe for apple pie. The effect on the conversion algorithms was immediate and chaotic. The engine's perfect logic systems stumbled as they tried to process the random combination of humor, nostalgia, and food preparation techniques emerging from Thompson's mind. "That's it," Martinez exclaimed. "The engine can't process truly random consciousness events. It's designed to convert ordered thoughts into more ordered thoughts, but it can't handle genuine chaos." "Everyone," Webb commanded, "think the most random thoughts you can manage. Mix memories, fantasies, songs, fears, hopes. Don't let your minds follow any logical patterns." Across the sector, something unprecedented began to happen. Human Special Forces operators started reciting poetry while planning tactical maneuvers. Alien fleet commanders began making strategic decisions based on childhood games from their home worlds. The surviving station crew mixed scientific calculations with emotional responses that defied all logic. The interdimensional entities, desperate to avoid conversion, began learning chaos from their human captives. They discovered that truly random thought required not just abandoning logic, but embracing the beautiful contradiction of consciousness that could simultaneously hold opposing ideas. "It's working," Park reported as her scanners showed the conversion engine beginning to fluctuate. "Its processing systems are overloading. There's too much genuine chaos for it to analyze and convert." But the engine adapted. Its perfect algorithms began to change, developing new conversion protocols designed to handle chaotic inputs. The battle was far from over. "Colonel," Martinez announced, "I'm ready to activate the quantum chaos amplifiers. But once I do this, there's no going back. We'll be flooding local space with so much quantum uncertainty that reality itself might become unstable." Webb looked around at his team, at soldiers who had volunteered for a mission they didn't fully understand, at scientists who had sacrificed their safety for knowledge, at alien allies who had chosen cooperation over conflict. In that moment, he realized that this chaotic gathering of unlikely partnerships was itself a weapon against the forces of absolute order. "Do it." The quantum chaos amplifiers activated with a sound that bypassed the ears entirely and struck directly at the fundamental forces that held matter together. Reality shimmered as probability waves collapsed and reformed in random patterns that followed no predictable logic. The conversion engine's response was immediate and violent. It began broadcasting powerful ordering algorithms designed to impose mathematical perfection on the chaos field. For a moment, the two forces were locked in perfect balance, absolute order striving to convert ultimate chaos. That's when the human fleet arrived. Captain Chen's Resilience dropped out of hyperspace, leading a battle group of Earth vessels that included ships from every major human military branch, merchant marine vessels that had volunteered for combat duty, and even a few civilian craft crewed by people who had refused to be left behind. "This is Captain Sarah Chen to all units," came the broadcast. "We've received intelligence about the situation from Colonel Webb's team. All vessels implement Chaos Protocol 7. Chaos Protocol 7 was something that existed only in the most classified military manuals, a tactical doctrine based on the principle that sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all. Every ship in the human fleet began operating according to completely random patterns. They fired at targets that posed no threat, defended positions of no strategic value, and communicated using codes that changed randomly every few minutes. The alien fleet commanders watched in amazement and horror as the human vessels seemed to operate without any coherent battle plan whatsoever. But the effect on the conversion engine was dramatic. Its perfect algorithms, designed to predict and counter organized resistance, couldn't cope with an enemy that refused to follow any logical patterns. "Impossible," the engine broadcast, its communication carrying overtones of confusion that seemed almost human. These chaos patterns have no underlying mathematical structure. How can conscious beings operate without logical frameworks? Because, Colonel Webb replied, his voice somehow carrying across dimensional barriers to reach the artificial intelligence. Logic is just one tool in our toolkit. When logic isn't enough, we improvise. The battle that followed defied description in conventional terms. Human vessels fought alongside interdimensional entities against a force that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Weapons that shouldn't have worked together created effects that violated several physical laws. Tactical decisions were made based on intuition, desperation, and pure human stubbornness. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. The conversion engine's perfect crystalline structure began to develop flaws, tiny imperfections where chaos had crept in despite its ordered algorithms. These flaws spread like cracks in glass, growing larger as the engine's systems struggled to process the sheer randomness of human consciousness. "The engine is destabilizing," Martinez reported, hardly believing her own readings. "Its core algorithms are developing recursive errors. It's trying to impose order on itself and failing." But victory came at a cost. The quantum chaos field that had saved them was also tearing holes in local spacetime. Reality was becoming so unstable that matter itself was having difficulty maintaining consistent form. "We need to shut down the chaos amplifiers," Martinez announced, "or we'll destroy everything we're trying to protect." "Can we do it gradually?" Webb asked. "No, it's all or nothing. Either we maintain maximum chaos and risk reality collapse, or we shut down completely and let the engine recover." It was Captain Park who provided the solution, using insights gained from watching human consciousness resist conversion algorithms. "What if we don't shut down completely? What if we maintain just enough chaos to keep the engine confused without destabilizing reality?" "That would require perfect calibration," Martinez warned. "Too much and we destroy ourselves. Too little and the engine recovers and converts everything." "Then we don't use perfect calibration," Webb replied, understanding finally what made humanity unique in a galaxy of ordered civilizations. "We use good enough." The concept seemed to cause confusion among both the interdimensional entities and the alien fleet. Good enough was not a standard they recognized. Every other species they had encountered sought perfection, optimization, maximum efficiency. But humans were willing to accept solutions that merely worked. Martinez began the most delicate operation of her scientific career, not trying to achieve perfect balance between order and chaos, but finding the messy, imperfect middle ground where both could coexist without destroying each other. The conversion engine, confronted with a reality that was neither perfectly ordered nor completely chaotic, experienced something unprecedented in its existence: uncertainty. Its algorithms, designed to convert chaos into order, had no protocols for dealing with conscious acceptance of imperfection. "Status unknown," the engine broadcast, its thoughts carrying overtones of confusion that were almost touching in their artificial bewilderment. "Local reality maintains insufficient order for conversion but insufficient chaos for rejection. Parameters, unclear." "That's called compromise," Webb explained, though he wasn't sure the artificial intelligence could understand the concept. "It's what happens when perfect solutions don't exist." The engine's response was to gradually withdraw from local space, its perfect algorithms unable to process a reality where conscious beings chose good enough over optimal outcomes. As it retreated into dimensional space, the crystalline perfection it had imposed on the station began to fade, replaced by the gloriously imperfect chaos of human engineering. The interdimensional entities, no longer facing immediate conversion, began to take on less rigid forms. Their consciousness, touched by contact with human chaos, had developed something they had never experienced before: the ability to accept uncertainty as a fundamental part of existence. "We understand now," the primary entity communicated, its thoughts carrying new overtones of wonder and possibility. "Your species does not generate chaos despite being conscious. You generate chaos because you are conscious. Consciousness and chaos are not separate phenomena, they are different aspects of the same reality." "Took you long enough to figure that out," Thompson replied, though his words carried warmth rather than criticism. As the immediate crisis passed, the long-term implications began to sink in. Humanity had not just survived first contact with interdimensional beings. had formed an alliance based on mutual understanding of chaos as a fundamental force in the universe. Colonel, Admiral Thex's voice came through the communication system. My science officers are reporting that the dimensional barriers in this sector have actually been strengthened by the chaos field. It's as if conscious randomness acts as a kind of immune system against forced order. Webb nodded, though the Admiral couldn't see him. Maybe that's why consciousness evolved in the first place, not just to think, but to maintain the chaos necessary for reality to remain flexible. Dr. Martinez was already planning follow-up research, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. If we can understand how consciousness generates chaos, we might be able to create defensive fields against convergence forces. Entire star systems could be protected by networks of conscious beings simply being themselves. And added Captain Park, we've learned that cooperation doesn't require similarity. Humans and interdimensional entities found common ground not because we're alike, but because we're both committed to preserving the right to be different. The rescue operation that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Human Special Forces operators worked alongside interdimensional entities to extract survivors from reality pockets that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. The alien fleet provided support and logistics for an operation that defied conventional understanding of physics and biology. As the survivors were brought aboard the rescue vessels, many reported experiences that would take years to fully process. Memories of existing in multiple realities simultaneously, of consciousness expanded beyond individual identity, of understanding the universe from perspectives that human minds weren't designed to handle. But they also reported something else. The absolute certainty that consciousness, in all its chaotic, unpredictable glory, was the universe's greatest defense against forces that sought to impose rigid order on infinite possibility. Colonel Webb stood in the observation lounge of the Resilience, looking out at space where the conversion engine had been. The stars looked different now, not just distant lights, but conscious participants in the grand chaos that kept reality flexible and alive. So, Captain Chen asked as she joined him, what do we call this? First contact, the chaos war, the reality defense? Webb considered the question seriously. How about we just call it Tuesday, because something tells me this is just the beginning. Behind them, human scientists worked alongside interdimensional entities to understand the implications of their victory. The galaxy had learned that consciousness wasn't just about intelligence or awareness. It was about the fundamental right to be unpredictable, to choose good enough over perfection, to embrace the beautiful chaos that made existence worth experiencing. And in the depths of space, other conversion engines detected the failure of their scout and began to analyze this new phenomenon. A species that fought not with superior technology or overwhelming force, but with the stubborn refusal to accept that any problem had only one solution. The humans called them special forces, but the universe was beginning to understand that every human was special in the same way, conscious, chaotic, and completely unwilling to accept defeat as a permanent condition. The war between order and chaos was far from over. But for the first time in cosmic history, chaos had conscious allies who understood that sometimes the best strategy was no strategy at all, and that victory didn't require perfection, just the willingness to be gloriously, defiantly, and creatively alive.